Imagine if the government was the only one with guns, and then it turned on its people. This is exactly why the Second Amendment exists. Here's what it states. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. The founders knew that government, if it got too big, could use armies to oppress its people. And it's true. Just look at tyrannical regimes, and you will discover that citizens are forbidden to own guns. So the founders empowered Americans to protect themselves by giving them the right to keep and bear arms. Some may argue that the Second Amendment doesn't apply to the individual, but that idea is completely false. America was founded upon the principle that rights belong to individuals, not the state. The Founding Fathers were gun owners, gun collectors, and hunters. They also had won their independence with their guns in hand. Since our country inherently upholds individual rights, there is no doubt that the Second Amendment was written with American citizens in mind. And on top of that, what if someone broke into your home in the middle of the night? What if there was an active shooter at your workplace, at the mall, or at your school? Or what if a terrorist attack happened in your city? The police and the military exist to protect American citizens, but they don't always make it there on time, especially when you have seconds to protect you and the people you love. Wouldn't you feel safer if you had a gun? The Second Amendment is one of the most important rights in our Constitution. The right for you to own a gun is a right that protects you, your family, and your country, and it must be defended.
Equality between men and women? I do, which is why I own a gun. My Glock 43 is my equalizer. Too NRA for you? Then let's take a step back and think about this. I will start with this premise. Men are physically stronger than women. I know, even this is controversial these days, but men have more muscle mass and greater bone density. They run faster and punch harder. It's called biology. If a woman is going to protect herself against a man who intends to do her serious harm, she needs to even the odds. And what's the best way for her to do that? Own a gun and know how to use it. Given this, you would think that feminists would be lining up in front of gun shops, spending quality time at the shooting range, and filing for concealed carry permits. But when was the last time you heard a feminist speak out for women owning guns? You haven't, because feminists aren't for gun ownership, they're for taking guns away from women. Well, you might say, if no one owned a gun, then everybody would be safer. Yes, and it would be nice if cheesecake was a diet food. There are over 300 million guns in the United States, and that's not going to change anytime soon. But even if we could build a giant magnet, fly it across the country, and snap up every gun, it wouldn't much matter to women's safety. In Great Britain, where it's almost impossible to get a gun, a woman is 3 times more likely to be raped than in America, according to a study by David Kopel, a professor of constitutional law at Denver University. Here's another telling comparison between gun-free UK and gun-owning US. In the United States, only about 13% of home burglaries take place when the occupants are home. But in the UK, almost 60% do. Professor Kopel explains the disparity. American burglars avoid occupied homes because of the risk of getting shot. English burglars prefer occupied homes because there will be wallets and purses with cash. And by the way, an assailant doesn't need a gun to be dangerous. What do you do if you're a woman and a man comes at you with a knife, or just his bare hands? If you want to depend on pepper spray or a whistle, okay, but I think your finger on the trigger of a gun would be more effective. Take the example of mail carrier Catherine Latta. After she had been assaulted and raped by her ex-boyfriend, Latta tried to purchase a firearm. She was told it might take a month to get a permit. "I'll be dead by then," she recalls telling the clerk. That afternoon, she went to a rough part of town and bought a handgun. 5 hours later, her ex-boyfriend attacked her outside of her home. She shot him in self-defense and saved her life. I should add that firing a gun is very rare. Just carrying it, let alone brandishing it, is a deterrent. And isn't that the issue? Personal safety? How is a woman supposed to defend herself? What if an intruder breaks into her home? Liberal TV personality Sherri Shepherd answered this question a few years ago. At 1 a.m, the alarm in our house went off, Shepherd told her co-hosts on the popular daytime show, The View. As the alarm blared, her husband, Sal, went downstairs to look around. If something happened to him, a terrified Shepard realized she had no way to protect herself or her son, Jeffrey. All I had was this wicker basket. I don't have a bat, nothing. We're going to get a gun, I told Sal. This just made me realize how vulnerable you are if you can't protect your home. And the police were wonderful. They came about 7 minutes later. But to me, that's 7 minutes too late. Luckily for Shepard, the incident was a false alarm. But there are lots of cases where the alarm is real, especially in high crime areas. Yet every year, progressives push for more and more gun control without ever considering who will pay the price. It won't be the bad guys. They always get the guns they want. It will be the good women who need to equal the odds in a dangerous confrontation with a man. Women owning guns shouldn't be a partisan issue. In fact, it's a women's rights issue. I'm all for equality between the sexes, and I practice what I preach. That's why I own a gun.
It's a nasty truth, but those who seek to inflict harm are not fazed by gun control laws. I happen to know this from personal experience. I've always felt a special bond with the members of your group. You live by Lincoln's words. Important principles may and must be inflexible. Your philosophy put its trust in people, so you insist on individuals be held responsible for their actions. The NRA believes that America's laws were made to be obeyed and that our constitutional liberties are just as important today as 200 years ago. And by the way, the Constitution does not say that government shall decree the right to keep and bear arms. The Constitution says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
The next time you hear a politician call for common sense gun control, listen for the details. You are likely to be treated to a torrent of platitudes about assault weapons, gun show sales, and other half measures. These sorts of proposals are rooted in a theory of gun control that has been around since the 1960s. The basic idea is that fewer guns equal less gun crime. But for this theory to have even a chance of working, drastic reductions in the supply of guns will be necessary. Everything else amounts to security theater. The late Senator Howard Metzenbaum, a strong gun control advocate, explained it this way: if you don't ban all guns, you might as well ban none of them. But few, if any, politicians who call for common sense gun control have the courage to propose this. Even putting aside the issue of the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which affirms the right to keep and bear arms, a gun ban has no broad popular support. Never mind the conservative states. Handgun ban referendums failed by large margins in two of our most liberal states, Massachusetts in 1976 and California in 1982. No serious attempts have been made since then. Recently, Australia's gun control efforts have gained new prominence as a possible model for the United States to follow. Let's take a closer look at Australia. In 1996, after a lunatic used a semi-automatic rifle to murder 34 people in Tasmania, the Australian government banned all semi-automatic rifles and repeating shotguns. Owners of roughly 700,000 registered firearms, about a quarter of the country's 3 million total guns, were required to turn them in for destruction. The government called this a buyback, but in fact no one had a choice. As my research shows, this model will not work in the United States for the simple reason that the U.S. has roughly 325 million guns. This is orders of magnitude more than any other country. Even if the Australian plan were tried in the U.S. and worked to perfection, we'd still be left with over 200 million guns, including handguns, which account for nearly 80% of gun crime. But gun confiscation has never worked to perfection, and sometimes threatens to make things worse.